Trooping the color was meant to be a display of unity, discipline, and royal confidence. Instead, behind the polished smiles and military precision, one private command changed everything. King Charles ordered Camilla to step back from a prominent ceremonial position after a royal insider leaked the truth about growing tension inside the palace. What looked like a seating adjustment became something far deeper, a public signal that even the queen consort was no longer untouchable. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles stood in a private palace room with the leak summary resting in his hands, and for a long moment, he said nothing. The page was not long. It did not need to be. A few lines were enough to tell him that the problem had escaped the walls that were meant to contain it. Trooping the color. The annual royal ceremony marking the monarch's official birthday with military precision and public balcony appearances was supposed to show order. Now, every position on that day would be read as a message. The king lowered the paper onto the desk with careful control, but the silence around him tightened. Charles understood why the leak mattered. It did not only expose tension, it exposed fear inside the household that Camilla had pushed too hard for visibility during a ceremony designed to place the crown above every personal ambition. One aide waited for him to ask how they would protect her. Instead, he asked how they would protect the monarchy. In that instant, the room knew something had shifted. Camilla received the instruction through a senior aide, and the words struck harder than any public criticism could have. She was not being removed. She was not being hidden. She was being moved just enough for everyone inside the palace to understand the meaning. The queen consort sat still, her face controlled, but the wound was immediate. Charles had not sent a suggestion. He had sent an order. Her husband had spoken as king, and that made the humiliation impossible to soften. The command carried a danger no one could ignore. If Camilla accepted it quietly, the palace would survive the day with discipline. If she resisted, the leak would become proof that the crown itself was being tested from within. Charles knew this. Camilla knew this. The aides knew this. That was why the smallest adjustment felt like a royal thunderclap. The order left behind one question no one dared say aloud. If Charles could publicly limit Camilla at trooping the color, what else was he prepared to take away? But the command was only shocking because of the people caught inside it. A king torn between marriage and monarchy, a queen consort facing humiliation, and a family watching every move with silent calculation. Before the order became palace history, it was a human wound. Charles was not merely a sovereign making a ceremonial adjustment. Camilla was not merely a consort being repositioned. William was not merely an observer waiting in the wings. Each person carried a private stake into trooping the color, and when the leak forced the truth into daylight, every smile, silence, and glance became part of a much larger battle. Charles felt the pressure settle around him long before the public saw anything. He knew his reign was still being judged, still being measured, still being compared to everything that came before it. Trooping the color, the formal parade held to mark the monarch's official birthday, mattered because it was not only a celebration. It was a national stage where the royal family had to look steady, united, and impossible to shake. One wrong signal could turn private tension into public doubt. Camilla understood the danger from another side. Her place beside the king had been earned through years of public storms, but it still depended on balance. The queen consort, meaning the wife of the reigning king who supports the monarch without holding sovereign power herself, carried a title that looked grand from the outside, but remained fragile inside palace walls. She could stand close to power, but she could not appear to control it. That was the line the leak had exposed. Camilla sat alone after the aide left, one hand resting on the arm of her chair. For a few seconds, she did not blink. Then disbelief hardened into anger. She understood exactly what stepping back meant. It told the household that her visibility could be reduced. It told the public, if they noticed, that Charles had chosen distance. The order wounded her because it did not come from an advisor. It came from the man she had stood beside through every storm. Charles carried his own wound in silence. He knew the decision hurt her, but defending her too openly would make the monarchy look ruled by marriage instead of duty. The crown, meaning the authority and public identity of the monarchy itself, had to appear stronger than any private bond. That was why his face remained controlled when aides spoke. He was not cold. He was trapped. William read the same briefing later and took his time before speaking. The prince understood what a balcony could become when the family beneath it was divided. He told a trusted aide that the balcony could not become a battlefield, and the sentence stayed in the room like a warning. A senior courtier then confirmed, through a documented internal account, that the leak had already reached more than one royal household. The crisis could no longer be held behind one palace door. Charles knew it. Camilla felt it. William recognized it. And to understand why one ceremonial step backward felt like punishment, the story had to return to the hidden trigger that turned palace discomfort into royal intervention. Every royal crisis has a moment people later whisper about as the beginning. For this story, it was not a balcony wave or a public speech. It was a private reception at St. James's Palace, where a quiet conversation turned sharp, a room fell silent, and one remark from Camilla was remembered by everyone who heard it. That single evening became the trigger that led Charles to act at Trooping the Color. Camilla arrived that evening expecting routine discussion, not a test of her standing. St. James's Palace, one of the oldest working royal residences used for official meetings and ceremonial planning, mattered because decisions made there often shaped what the public later saw without knowing the struggle behind it. The private reception had been arranged to settle final details before Trooping the Color, the monarch's official birthday parade. But the room carried more tension than celebration. Every aide understood that placement at a royal event could quietly announce favor, distance, trust, or warning. Charles listened as the schedule was discussed, and at first, he kept his face still. Camilla heard the proposed arrangement and challenged it in front of senior aides, insisting her place should not be reduced for optics. The words were sharp because they suggested the palace was managing her image, not respecting her role. The queen consort kept her chin lifted, and she did not soften the sentence after it landed. Charles turned toward her with controlled strain, and the king understood that everyone in that room had witnessed something dangerous. William stood nearby and said almost nothing, but his silence carried its own judgment. The prince watched Charles absorb the embarrassment, and he understood the issue had moved beyond personal preference. A ceremonial arrangement, meaning the planned order of where royals stand, sit, arrive, and appear during an official event, was never just decoration. It told the country who mattered in that moment. William knew that if Camilla seemed to challenge the structure openly, the family would look divided before the nation ever saw the balcony. A senior courtier recorded the exchange later in a private memo, and that documented account became the source that broke the silence inside the palace. The courtier did not need dramatic language. The facts were damaging enough. Camilla had pushed back in a room full of people trained to notice rank. Charles had been forced to respond without humiliating her. William had witnessed the strain and understood the danger. That memo became part of the leak that dragged a hidden fracture into the light. The truth inside the leak was colder than gossip. Several aides believed Camilla's push for prominence risked overshadowing the message Trooping the Color was meant to send: stability, continuity, and disciplined royal order. Charles saw that the private reception had become the foundation of a public scandal, and he knew someone had to be confronted before the ceremony itself became uncontrollable. And so the story moved from whispered memos and wounded pride to the room where Charles and Camilla finally faced each other without the protection of ceremony. The confrontation did not begin with shouting. It began with a closed door. Charles asked for the room to be cleared, and for a few seconds, silence carried more force than anger ever could. Camilla knew why she had been summoned. Charles knew what he had already decided. Between them stood not only a marriage, but a crown that demanded obedience even from the woman seated closest to it. Charles remained standing after the aide withdrew, and the space between him and Camilla felt cold. The crown, meaning the authority and duty of the monarchy itself, mattered here because it was larger than marriage, sympathy, and embarrassment. Trooping the Color had become the test. If the king softened the order now, the palace would look frightened by the leak. If he held firm, the queen consort would know she had been corrected by the person whose loyalty she trusted most. Camilla did not sit at first. She watched Charles as if searching for the husband beneath the monarch, but his face gave little comfort. The queen consort asked whether he was protecting the monarchy or punishing her, and the question landed with brutal weight. Charles took off his glasses and set them down slowly, not because he needed time to think, but because he needed time not to wound her. He answered that the family could survive discomfort, but the crown could not appear divided. Camilla heard the sentence and understood the true damage. The leak had not merely exposed a disagreement, It had forced Charles to choose between defending her and defending his reign. The king's personal command, meaning an instruction coming directly from the monarch rather than from advisors, left no space for her to dismiss the decision as palace management. She could challenge aides and schedules. She could not pretend this had come from anyone else. Charles then revealed the part that changed the room again. The order was not limited to one seating change. Her arrival timing would be adjusted. Her balcony placement would be revised. Her ceremonial proximity, meaning how close she appeared to the monarch publicly, would be controlled. Camilla's expression did not collapse, but something behind her eyes hardened. She had expected restriction, not a full rearrangement of her public presence. Camilla left with her composure intact, and Charles did not follow her. That silence hurt more than the command. Outside the room, an aide looked up as she passed, and for a heartbeat, the queen consort's hand trembled against the wall. The confrontation settled the order, but not the deeper question of power. Because behind Charles's decision stood a machinery of influence Camilla could no longer ignore. Palaces rarely move because of one voice. They move through pressure, memory, fear, and calculation. Charles gave the order, but around him stood courtiers, advisors, family members, and silent witnesses who understood the stakes of trooping the color. Camilla's step back was not improvised. It was shaped by a deeper palace instinct. When personal loyalty threatens public authority, the institution protects itself first. Charles reviewed the revised layout with a stillness that made the room uneasy. Ceremonial placement, meaning where each royal stands, arrives, sits, or appears during an official event, mattered because the public often reads those positions as signs of trust and rank. Trooping the color had become more than a parade. It was now a test of whether the monarchy could correct itself after the leak without admitting weakness. Every entrance, every pause, every balcony position had to say the same thing: control had returned. A long-serving courtier watched the king move through the papers line by line. Charles paused when he reached Camilla's name, and that pause told the courtier more than any speech could have. The monarch did not cross anything out. He did not ask for softer language. He simply looked at the revised plan and approved it without comment. The silence felt harsh, because everyone knew what the adjustment meant. Camilla would still be present, but she would no longer dominate the moment. William stood apart from the emotion of it, but not from the responsibility. The prince was quietly resolved, not triumphant. He understood that Camilla would feel exposed, and he also understood that another public sign of internal strain could damage confidence in the family. The future king had learned that royal unity is not only about smiles. Sometimes it is about preventing one person's discomfort from becoming the whole institution's crisis. One advisor warned Charles in careful words that reversing the order would be far more dangerous than issuing it. If the king backed down, the leak would look accurate. Worse, Camilla would appear more powerful than the institution meant to contain every royal role. The advisor's warning came through a recorded planning conversation kept for internal reference, and Charles heard the message clearly. This was no longer about whether the queen consort felt slighted. This was about whether the crown looked afraid of her. The revised plan carried a deliberate visual message. Charles would remain central. William would remain steady. Camilla would be visible, dignified, and unmistakably restrained. That balance mattered because the monarchy needed to show continuity without surrendering authority. The palace was not removing her. It was limiting the meaning of her presence. Camilla learned the plan had already been circulated, and the humiliation became real. Discussion was over. Execution had begun. What had started as a private wound now became an operational reality, and the queen consort had to face the first consequence of a palace that had already moved on without her consent. The cruelest part of royal punishment is that it often looks like protocol. No announcement, no dramatic statement, no public explanation, just a changed position, a delayed entrance, a different chair, a smaller role. For Camilla, the fallout began when the final trooping the color schedule arrived. One line had changed, but that line carried the full weight of Charles's command and the palace's judgment. Camilla held the schedule longer than necessary, as if the words might change if she refused to react. The ceremonial schedule, meaning the official plan that tells each royal where to stand, when to arrive, and how the event will unfold, mattered because it turned private pressure into public fact. Once her placement appeared on that page, the decision could no longer be softened in a quiet conversation. It had become part of the machine. The queen consort read the line once. Then she read it again, Her entrance had been adjusted. Her position had been narrowed. Her place beside Charles remained, but the meaning of that place had changed. Camilla folded the paper carefully instead of tearing it, and that small act revealed the battle inside her. She wanted to reject the humiliation. She wanted to challenge the order, but she also knew that one uncontrolled reaction would prove exactly what the palace feared. Charles saw her later across a formal room, and the sight struck him harder than he expected. He had prepared himself for anger. He had expected coldness, maybe even defiance. Instead, the king saw hurt first. That wounded him, because the command had not come from cruelty. It had come from survival. The monarchy needed calm, and calm demanded sacrifice. Yet knowing why he had done it did not make watching her pain any easier. Camilla asked a staff member one question in a low voice, and the question changed the mood around her. She wanted to know whether William had supported the change. The staff member did not answer quickly enough. That pause told her more than words. The issue was no longer only ceremony. It had become family loyalty. If the prince had agreed with the decision, then the step back was not just Charles correcting her. It was the future of the monarchy closing ranks. The leak kept moving beyond palace walls. Media circles began hearing that the Trooping the Color choreography had been altered, and aides realized the public might notice faster than expected. Choreography, in royal terms, meant the carefully planned movement of people during a ceremony, and this mattered because movement could become message. A slower entrance, a changed position, a quieter role. Each detail could turn into a headline. Camilla stayed composed, but composure had become its own kind of suffering. Charles stayed firm, but firmness had become its own kind of grief. The machinery had done its work, but the marriage still had to absorb the blow. And the true turning point came when the king and the queen consort were finally left alone with the damage. The turning point came not in public, but in a quiet room after the palace had finished deciding. No aides stood nearby. No documents waited on the table. No ceremonial language softened the truth. Charles and Camilla faced the cost of the order as husband and wife, not sovereign and consort. For the first time, the question was not where she would stand, but whether she still felt seen. Charles entered with the burden of a decision that had already become final. Trooping the Color, the public ceremony marking the monarch's official birthday, mattered because the country expected the royal family to appear steady when private pressure was at its worst. The revised plan had settled the public issue, but it had not settled the private wound. The king knew the palace had protected itself. Now he had to face the woman who felt sacrificed by that protection. Camilla did not greet him with anger. That made it worse. The queen consort, meaning the king's wife who supports him publicly but does not rule in her own right, sat with a stillness that carried more pain than shouting. She told Charles that stepping back before the nation felt like being corrected in front of everyone who had ever doubted her place. Her voice broke once, only once, and then she forced it back into control. Charles listened without interrupting, and his restraint felt heavy between them. The crown, meaning the public authority and survival of the monarchy, had become the invisible third presence in the room. He admitted the order had not been easy. Then he said the line Camilla feared most. The monarchy could not survive if every personal wound became a public crisis. The king was not dismissing her pain. He was telling her that pain could not be allowed to rule the day. Camilla finally revealed what had cut deepest. The reduced role had hurt, but the timing had wounded her more. Charles had reached the decision before speaking to her. She had not been asked to understand it first. She had been told to accept it after the palace had already moved. That was the part that made the order feel less like protection and more like abandonment. Charles answered with quiet finality. The leak had forced his hand, but the St. James's Palace reception had made the problem impossible to ignore. That reception, the private planning event where Camilla challenged the arrangement before senior aides, mattered because it gave the leak a sharp and believable center. Once that moment entered the documented account, the palace could no longer pretend the tension was harmless. Camilla accepted the order outwardly, but acceptance was not peace. Charles saw that. The queen consort understood that the world had not yet reacted, and Trooping the Color was about to turn private pain into public interpretation. The palace had made its choice, Camilla had absorbed it, and now the nation was about to read every inch of distance as a verdict. By morning, the story no longer belonged only to the palace. It belonged to newspapers, broadcasters, crowds, commentators, and viewers who studied every frame like evidence. Camilla's step back became the image everyone wanted to decode. The monarchy had tried to contain the leak through choreography, but the public saw the distance, felt the tension, and understood that something inside the royal household had shifted. Camilla appeared composed when the ceremony unfolded, but composure did not save her from interpretation. Trooping the color, the monarch's official birthday parade, mattered because millions watched it as a living picture of royal strength. Every position told a story. Every pause carried weight. When the queen consort stood slightly apart from where many expected her to be, the change did not look accidental. It looked deliberate, and that made it powerful. Charles kept his face formal, but the public had already begun reading him too. Palace statements stayed controlled and minimal, using calm language that explained nothing fully. That restraint mattered because silence can sometimes protect an institution, but it can also feed suspicion. The king understood that the monarchy, meaning the royal institution as a public symbol of national continuity, had survived the day. Yet survival had come with a price. Everyone could see the distance. Camilla gave the moment its emotional center without saying a word. One camera caught her looking briefly toward Charles before lowering her gaze, and that small movement became the image people replayed again and again. The queen consort did not break. She did not protest, but the look carried enough pain for viewers to build their own story around it. Charles remained still beside the ceremony's order, yet the tension in his jaw made commentators speak of correction, not coincidence. A newspaper front page sealed the public mood the next morning. The cropped balcony image showed Camilla standing slightly apart beneath the headline, "The Step Back That Spoke Volumes." That phrase mattered, because it turned a private palace decision into a national verdict. A broadcaster later framed the scene as, "the clearest sign yet that palace discipline has returned," and the words made the order sound less like scheduling and more like judgment. William's quiet presence sharpened the message even further. The prince did not need to speak for viewers to understand his role in the new balance. He stood steady while Charles remained central, and Camilla appeared restrained. That arrangement told the public that the future of the monarchy was being protected through discipline, not comfort. The future king became part of the meaning without ever needing to claim it. The public reached its conclusion before the palace could explain. Camilla had stepped back. Charles had held the line. William had remained steady. Once the nation had seen the distance, there was no returning to the old illusion, and the final meaning of the king's order became impossible to avoid. In the end, the order was not merely about Camilla stepping back at trooping the color. It was about the monarchy drawing a line between personal devotion and public duty. Charles did not erase his loyalty to her, but he proved that loyalty had limits when the crown itself was at risk. The moment was painful, controlled, and unmistakable. A queen consort was corrected, and a king chose the institution. Charles understood the cost of that choice more deeply once the ceremony was over. Trooping the color, the monarch's official birthday parade, mattered because it placed the royal family before the nation as a symbol of unity, strength, and control. By preserving Camilla's presence but reducing her prominence, the king delivered a message that could not be misunderstood. She was still beside him, but she was no longer beyond correction. That balance became the whole verdict. Camilla carried the conclusion quietly. The queen consort, meaning the king's wife who supports him publicly but does not rule, did not disappear from the royal picture, but she understood what had changed. Influence without restraint now had a price. Her wounded acceptance became part of the story because she had not been cast out. She had been contained. And containment, inside a palace, can feel almost as painful as rejection. Charles protected the monarchy, but the decision left a private bruise ceremony could not hide. The crown, meaning the authority and survival of the royal institution, demanded that he act as monarch before husband. He did exactly that. Yet duty did not make the wound vanish. It only gave the wound a reason. The king had restored discipline, but he had also shown Camilla that even love must step aside when the institution feels threatened. William's quiet steadiness gave the story its generational meaning. The prince did not need dramatic words or public triumph. His restraint showed that the future of the monarchy would be built on discipline, not personal entitlement. He understood what Charles had finally proved. A royal family can survive scandal, but it cannot survive uncertainty at the center of power. The leaked truth revealed the deeper reality inside the palace. The institution can absorb whispers. It can absorb headlines. It can even absorb pain. But it will not tolerate the appearance that one person's ambition, hurt, or influence can bend the monarchy around them. That was why Camilla's step back became more than a ceremonial change. It became a royal warning. Charles's order marked the moment the crown reasserted control. Camilla learned the cost of public prominence. William stood as the symbol of disciplined continuity, and the monarchy reminded everyone that survival comes before sentiment. There is no unresolved mystery left in this moment, only the cold, final truth that when the palace felt threatened, the crown did what it has always done. It protected itself first. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.